At my sister's black tie wedding in Boston, my father grabbed the microphone and said she couldn't even find a date before shoving me into the courtyard fountain. While guests laughed and clapped, I smoothed my soaked dress, said, "Remember this moment," and 20 minutes later, the ballroom doors opened. The water was cold enough to knock the breath out of me. Not figuratively, literally. I hit the surface of that fountain and my lungs just stopped. Like my body couldn't process the shock fast enough to keep functioning. The marble edge scraped my palm as I went down. The sound of the impact, a full, hard splash, echoed off the stone walls of the Fairmont Boston's courtyard, and for a half second there was silence. Then the laughter started. I am going to need you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not a dramatic person. I have never been a dramatic person. I have spent the better part of 32 years being the least dramatic person in a family that treats theatrics the way other families treat oxygen, necessary for survival, consumed without thought. I don't cry in restaurants. I don't make scenes at airports. I don't send the food back at dinner, even when it's wrong. I absorb things. I process them quietly. I move on. So, when I tell you that I stood up out of that fountain, water pouring off a $1,400 navy silk dress, mascara tracking in twin black rivers down my face, every person in a 200-guest black tie wedding staring at me, some of them still clapping, and said 4 words that stopped my father's smirk cold, I need you to understand that I meant every single one of them. Remember this moment, Dad. He laughed. He actually laughed. He had no idea what was coming. Let me back up 7 months, because this story doesn't start at the Fairmont. It starts in a conference room in Singapore at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, when my assistant Marcus knocked on the glass door and slid a cream-colored envelope across the table without interrupting the call. I was on a live video conference with representatives from 4 sovereign wealth funds, walking through the final structure of a $2.3 billion infrastructure acquisition that had taken 16 months to architect. Marcus knew better than to knock unless it was urgent. I glanced at the envelope. Allison Campbell and James Whitmore, together with their families, request the honor of your presence. I set it face down and kept talking. It's not that I was surprised Allison was getting married. She'd been with James since their 3rd year at Brown, and James was the kind of man my parents had always wanted to parade at Christmas. Old Boston money, broad shoulders, a firm handshake that meant something to my father's generation. What surprised me was the "together with their families" language. My family historically did not acknowledge that I was part of it unless they needed something from me. I'd been 12 when I first understood that I was the wrong kind of Campbell daughter. Allison was luminous. Everyone said so. Blonde and easy and socially fluent in a way that I, quiet and angular and already more interested in spreadsheets than sororities, simply wasn't. My father, Robert Campbell, was a tax attorney with a practice in Beacon Hill and a deep attachment to the idea of legacy. He coached Allison's lacrosse team. He attended every one of her dance recitals. He introduced her at his firm's holiday parties as my daughter. He introduced me, when he introduced me at all, as the other one. I don't say this to perform sadness for you. I say it as operational context. After Singapore, I spent 2 years in London, then 3 in Hong Kong. I came back to the States only when my company, I was then serving as Chief Strategy Officer of Reed Capital Partners, a private equity and infrastructure firm with roughly $40 billion in assets under management, opened its Boston office. I was 30 when I moved back. I had not spoken to my parents in 11 months by then, not out of hostility, but simply because there had been nothing to say. I did not tell them when the Boston office launched. I did not tell them when I was promoted to Director of Global Operations. I did not tell them when, on a Tuesday evening in March, 3 years before this wedding, I married Nathan Reed in a private ceremony at a vineyard in the Willamette Valley, with 14 people present, 2 of whom were my parents' age and neither of whom were my parents. I didn't tell them because they had never once asked about my life, not once. Not a single phone call that began with, "How are you, Meredith?" rather than, "Your aunt is upset about," or "Your grandmother wants to know if you're," or, my personal favorite, "Your father thinks you should consider coming home before." So, when that invitation landed on my conference table in Singapore, I almost said no. Nathan was the one who convinced me otherwise. "Go," he said, over dinner in our apartment 2 days later. He was still in Tokyo for a series of acquisitions, and we were talking on FaceTime, his face tilted toward the camera the way he did when he was being deliberately gentle with me. "You'll regret it if you don't. She's your sister. She hasn't called me in 4 years. She's still your sister." He paused. "And I'll be there. I'm flying in from Tokyo. The Haneda deal closes on the 14th, so I'll be on a helicopter to Logan before the reception ends. You won't be alone." Nathan Reed is 6'2", custom-made suits, the kind of quiet that fills a room. He grew up in Medford, Massachusetts, the son of a plumber and a school librarian. He built his first company at 23 and sold it at 26. He is the least pretentious billionaire I have ever met, which is a sentence that I recognize sounds insane, but I mean it sincerely. He carries his own luggage. He remembers the names of every person on his staff, and he had, for the 3 years of our marriage and 2 years before it, been the only person in my life who looked at me like I was exactly the right amount of person. "I'll be fine," I told him. "I know you will," he said, "but I'll be there anyway." I RSVP'd for 2, giving only my name. I thought it would be a pleasant surprise. I drove to the Fairmont alone in a rented Volvo, because my car was in the shop and I wasn't about to show up to a black tie event in a lift. It was October, and Boston was doing that thing it does in October where every street looks like a magazine cover and the air smells like like wood smoke and ambition. I checked into my room, a suite I'd booked because I refused to share a bathroom wall with a stranger, and took 20 minutes to do my makeup and put on the dress. Navy silk, structured bodice, knife-pleated skirt. I'd bought it in Milan the previous spring and had not worn it yet. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment, then I went downstairs. The vultures arrived before I'd even reached the cocktail hour. Rebecca, my mother's sister's daughter, spotted me from across the marble lobby. Rebecca and I have a relationship I would describe as mutually assured disappointment. She's 41 and has never forgiven me for getting into Harvard when she went to Northeastern, a grudge she has maintained with impressive dedication for 15 years. Meredith, you came alone. She hugged me in the way people hug when they're actually measuring you. How brave. Hello, Rebecca. I saw the RSVP. Just one? She tilted her head. Still not seeing anyone? I'm seeing plenty of people, I said pleasantly. Excuse me. My Aunt Vivian cornered me at the champagne table. Vivian is 73 and has strong opinions about everything except the things that actually matter. Love the practical haircut, she said, with the specific warmth of someone describing a mediocre casserole. Very sensible. My mother found me before I made it to the seating chart. Patricia Campbell is a beautiful woman who became beautiful by working at it constantly and expecting her daughters to do the same. She had, over the years, communicated her disappointment in me through a specific vocabulary of small observations. Not criticisms, she would insist, just noticing. She noticed that I had gained weight. She noticed that I wore flat shoes when heels would be more appropriate. She noticed things about my career choices, my apartment, my preference for black coffee over her preferred vanilla latte, in a way that made each noticing land like a small, precisely aimed dart. She scanned me now, head to toe, in under 2 seconds. That color washes you out, she said. You should have called me first. You're right, I said. I'll know for the next time my sister gets married. She didn't smile. I found my table. Table 19. In a ballroom of 20 tables, table 19 was as far from the family tables as you could get without actually being in the parking garage. I was seated next to a great aunt named Dorothy who was 87, used a hearing aid set to the wrong frequency, and had, I quickly discovered, no idea that I existed. Are you one of the Wellington girls? She asked, squinting at me. No, I'm Robert and Patricia's other daughter. Oh, a pause. The pause that contains an entire sentence. I didn't know there was another one. I picked up my champagne glass and took a long, careful sip. The ceremony was beautiful, in the way that other people's happiness is sometimes beautiful, a little painful to look at directly, but genuinely moving if you let yourself. Allison walked down the aisle in a dress that had clearly cost more than the GDP of a small municipality, and James cried when he saw her, and for about 4 minutes I forgot everything else. Then the reception started. Then my father found a microphone. I should explain something about Robert Campbell. My father is not a stupid man. He is a tax attorney with 30 years of practice, and a client list that includes 3 state senators and a former governor. He is intelligent and charming and capable of extraordinary warmth toward people whose opinion of him he values. I have simply, in 32 years, not been one of those people. I don't know if he knew, when he picked up that wireless microphone during the cocktail hour, that the sound system was still live through the entire ballroom and the adjacent courtyard. I don't know if he knew that the 2 photographers and 1 videographer were still actively shooting. I suspect he didn't care. My father has always believed that what happens to me doesn't really count. She couldn't even find a date. His voice came through the speakers with professional clarity. The hum of 200 guests, talking, laughing, ordering drinks, dimmed by a few degrees as heads turned. 32 years old, he continued, looking at me from across the courtyard, and there was something in his eyes that I recognized from childhood. Not cruelty exactly. Something worse than cruelty. Amusement. Not a prospect in sight. Laughter. Actual, genuine, champagne-loosened laughter. From people who did not know me, who would not know me tomorrow, who were laughing simply because a man in a good suit was being funny at someone else's expense, and that apparently was a sufficient reason. My mother raised her hand to cover her smile. Allison did not bother. He crossed the courtyard toward me. He did not put down the microphone. Each step brought him closer, and the crowd shifted just slightly, the way crowds do when they sense something happening that is both uncomfortable and entertaining, and they haven't yet decided which reaction is more socially acceptable. You've always been the disappointment. The words came out conversational, almost gentle, which was worse. Always the failure. Always an embarrassment to the Campbell name. He was 6 inches from my face now. I did not step back. I want to be very clear about that. I did not step back. Dad, his hands hit my shoulders, hard. Both palms, flat, a shove that had intention behind it. Not an accident, not a stumble, not a misunderstanding. A decision. I went back into the fountain edge first, and then I went down. The water was cold enough to knock the breath out of me. I already told you this. I'm telling you again, because I want you to understand what cold water at the Fairmont Boston in October feels like when you've just been pushed into it by your father while wearing $400 of Italian silk and 200 people are watching. I want you to understand what it feels like to push yourself up off a marble floor, soaking wet, knowing that the photographers are still shooting, knowing that not one single person in that crowd has moved to help you. Not my mother, not my sister, not one cousin, not one family friend, not one of the people who have known me since I was 4 years old and wearing patent leather shoes to Christmas. I stood up. The dress was ruined. My left heel had snapped in the fall. Mascara burned in the corners of my eyes. I looked at my father, then I looked at my mother. Then I looked at Allison, who was standing with her hand over her mouth, and I could not, even then, tell if she was horrified or laughing. I pushed the wet hair off my face with one careful hand. "Remember this moment," I said. I kept my voice quiet. I kept it steady. I wanted every word to land exactly where I placed it. All of it. Something in my voice made him stop smiling. I noted that. I walked back inside, leaving a trail of water across the Fairmont's marble floor. I had a plan. I should tell you that now, because I don't want you to think what happened next was luck. It was not luck. It was a plan that had been sitting in my back pocket like a loaded thing since the moment I'd RSVP'd to this wedding, because I have known my family my entire life, and I knew, with a certainty that required no psychic ability whatsoever, that something like this was going to happen. Not the fountain specifically, but something. Something designed to make me small. I went upstairs. I called Marcus, my assistant, who was in Boston. I confirmed the timing. I texted Nathan. He just shoved me into a fountain. "I'm fine. Stay on schedule." His reply came in under 90 seconds. "I saw from the terrace. My team is ready. Say the word." I typed, "Stand down. I don't want to ruin Allison's wedding." 20 minutes. I changed into the backup dress. Also navy. Also silk. A Roland Moray sheath I'd brought specifically in case the first one was ruined. Because I had known, and touched up my makeup in the mirror of my suite. My hands were steady. I was not shaking. I was not crying. I was the calmest I had been all day. I went back downstairs with 11 minutes to spare. The cocktail hour had resumed. My father was holding court near the bar, animated and red-faced, and receiving the specific kind of laughter from men his age that functions as approval. My mother was talking to someone I didn't recognize. Allison was being shepherded toward the ballroom for the formal reception, her dress train held by two bridesmaids who were pretending very hard that nothing had happened. I found my seat at table 19. Dorothy asked me again if I was one of the Wellington girls. "Not tonight," I said. At 6:47 p.m., the ballroom doors opened. Two men entered first. I'd seen Marcus do the advance walkthrough that morning, and I recognized his work. He'd made sure the trajectory was clear. These two men were from Nathan's security detail, and they had, as long as I'd known them, the particular posture of people who have spent years learning to read rooms and exits at the same time. Sharp eyes, military bearing, they moved to positions without being directed to, which is what very good security teams do. My father saw them from across the room and made a decision that was entirely consistent with his character. He walked over. "This is a private event," he announced. "The corporate conference is in the West Wing." They looked through him, precisely, clinically, through him. Then Nathan walked in. He was still in his Tokyo suit. Charcoal brioni, no tie, collar loosened 2 buttons, and his hair was slightly windblown from the helicopter that had brought him in from Logan, where his pilot had landed 40 minutes earlier. He moved through a room of 200 people the way a current moves through water, not forcefully, just inevitably. People shifted out of his path without being asked to, because something in the way he moved communicated that the path was already his. His eyes found mine across the entire ballroom. The distance was maybe 60 feet. He crossed it in about 15 seconds, and the room rearranged itself around him as he did. "Meredith," he said. He took my hands. He kissed me once. Not a performance kiss, not a statement-making kiss, just the kiss he always gives me when he's been traveling and has finally reached me, quiet and certain and entirely his. Then he turned. My mother was 3 feet away. "Mrs. Campbell." Nathan's voice is the kind of voice that doesn't need to be loud. "I'm Nathan Reed, Meredith's husband." The word landed. My mother's face did something I had never seen it do in 32 years of watching it. It went completely still. "Husband," she whispered. 3 years next month," Nathan said pleasantly. "We would have invited you to the wedding, but it was quite small. I hope you'll forgive us." I watched her process this. I watched the calculations happening in real time behind her eyes. Nathan Reed, Reed Capital Partners, the Forbes cover she'd probably seen without reading the name carefully. The $40 billion AUM firm headquartered 3 miles from where she drank her morning coffee. My father pushed through the crowd. He'd heard enough to know something was wrong, not enough to know what, and the specific shade of red on his face was one I recognized from childhood as the color of a man who suspects he's losing control of a situation and is about to respond by escalating. "Is this some kind of prank?" His voice was pitched too loud, the way voices get when the ground has shifted and the speaker hasn't caught up yet. "Hiring actors to make a scene at your sister's wedding? Mr. Campbell." Nathan's voice dropped 1 degree. Just one. It was enough. The nearest cluster of guests went quiet. Then the next cluster, rippling outward the way silence does in a room when something real is happening. "I watched from the terrace while you pushed your daughter into a fountain," Nathan said. He was not angry. He was something colder and more precise than angry. "I heard every word you said into that microphone. My security team was positioned and ready to intervene." He paused. Meredith signaled them to stand down. "She didn't want to ruin her sister's wedding, even after everything you did." Another pause, measured and deliberate. "I want you to sit with that for a moment." My father's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then the ballroom doors opened a second time. Sophia Chen has been Nathan's chief of staff for 6 years. She is 38 years old, holds dual degrees from Wharton and Georgetown Law, and has a way of entering a room that suggests every room was already expecting her. Beside her was Daniel Park, Reed Capital's general counsel, who had flown in from New York that morning. "Director Campbell," Sophia said clearly, addressing me, using the title that my company used internally and that had, until approximately 45 seconds ago, meant nothing to anyone in that room. "I apologize for the interruption. We have a situation requiring your immediate attention. The Meridian closing has moved up. Singapore's FSA wants the documentation filed before their Monday session. The word director hit the room before the sentence finished. Whispers erupted. The specific, cascading whisper of 200 people triangulating information simultaneously. Someone in the back had already Googled. I know this because I heard the voice. Young, male, slightly incredulous. Forbes cover last month. Net worth listed at 12 billion. 12 was Nathan's, not mine. But our finances are, as they say, commingled. And it did not seem like the moment for a clarification. My mother grabbed the back of a chair. She grabbed it with both hands, and I watched the color leave her face. And I want to be precise about this. I felt nothing in particular. Not triumph, not grief. Something quieter than either. Something that felt like the closing of a very long account. My father was standing completely still for what I believe may have been the first time in his life. He is a man who is always moving, gesturing, leaning, filling space the way he fills every room he enters. He was not moving now. Allison was looking at me. Not at Nathan, not at Sophia, not at the guests around her who were whispering and reaching for their phones. At me. Like she was seeing me for the first time. She hadn't been. She'd been seeing a version of me that her family had built and furnished and handed to her like a dollhouse. The disappointment, the failure, the one who couldn't find a date, the one who didn't matter. She'd never looked past it, because looking past it would have cost her something. And Allison had spent 30 years in a family that rewarded comfort and punished curiosity. I looked at her. I did not smile. I did not perform anything. I just looked at her, the way you look at someone you have loved imperfectly and been failed by completely. And I held her gaze for exactly as long as it took me to breathe in and breathe out once. Then I turned to go. Meredith. Wait. My father's voice cracked at the edges, a sound I did not recognize, which told me something. I stopped walking. I did not turn around yet. The room had gone very quiet. 200 people holding their drinks and their breath in equal measure. We need to talk. His voice was trying to find its footing and couldn't. We're your parents. We've always been. Dad. I turned slowly. He looked old to me suddenly, in a way he hadn't 3 hours ago. Smaller, his collar slightly damp, his face the face of a man who has just understood, not that he was wrong. I do not think he arrived at that yet, but that he had made a tactical error so catastrophic that it could not be walked back. Whatever you're about to say next, I said. Think very carefully. His face went pale, because he finally understood. He was standing in a room full of his friends, his colleagues, his social world, and he was looking at me, the other daughter, the disappointment, the one he had shoved into a fountain an hour ago. And he was understanding that I was not, had never been, what he thought I was. That the story he had told himself and everyone else about me for 32 years was not the story that existed in any verifiable reality. I was not the one with something to lose anymore. He was. I want to tell you what happened afterward, because the aftermath matters. I spent the rest of that evening in the hotel lobby with Sophia and Daniel, working through the Singapore documentation on my laptop in a way that was entirely real and not staged for effect, though I will admit it served both purposes simultaneously. Nathan stayed with me. He had salmon at the hotel restaurant at 8 p.m. and texted me a photo of the plate with a caption that said, "This is extremely average." I laughed for the first time all day. What happened with my family, I'll tell you. My father did not come to find me that night. My mother did. She knocked on the door of my suite at 10:14 p.m. I know the time because I checked my phone when I heard the knock, because Marcus had taught me years ago to note the exact time of significant events. And this, my mother, who had not come to find me in a decade, standing in a hallway at the Fairmont, Boston, was a significant event. I opened the door. She looked at me for a moment without speaking. "I didn't stop him," she said finally. "No," I agreed. "You didn't." "I should have." "Yes," I said. "You should have. Many times. Over many years." She reached up and pressed her fingers to the side of her face. A gesture I knew. She'd done it since I was a child when she was trying not to cry in front of someone. "Meredith, I didn't know. About your work. About Nathan. We didn't know. You didn't ask," I said. "That's different from not knowing." She stood there. I let her stand there. "I'm not going to scream at you," I said. "I'm not going to make a scene. You know I don't do those things." I kept my voice even. "But I need you to understand something, Mom. Everything I am, all of it, I built without you, without Dad, without a single phone call that started with, 'How are you?' I built it in Singapore and London and Hong Kong alone, because you made it very clear when I was 12 years old that I was not the daughter you'd hoped for, and I spent about 4 years trying to fix that before I understood that it wasn't mine to fix." I paused. "I'm not angry. I want you to know that. I stopped being angry about this somewhere over the Pacific Ocean in 2019, but I need you to know what it cost." She was crying. Quietly, the way she always did things. Contained, minimal, self-conscious. What do we do?" she asked. "How do we?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "That's not something I can answer tonight." I closed the door. 3 months later, I met with Allison for lunch. It was her idea. She texted me on a Sunday morning. Not a phone call, not an email, a text, which was the medium of our generation, and also, I suspected, easier to send than to say. And the message was simple. "Can we talk? Not about Mom and Dad, just us." We met at a restaurant in the South End. She got there before me, which surprised me. She'd always been the kind of person who arrived exactly when expected, who performed punctuality rather than practicing it. But she was already at the table when I walked in, no phone in her hand, just her. "You look good," she said. "You too." We ordered. We talked around it for a while, the way you do. Then she set down her fork and said, said. I knew. You know, not all of it. Not the company, not Nathan. But I knew you were. I knew you had made something of yourself. She said it carefully. I didn't want to fight with Dad about it. I know, I said. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. It's not. She looked at her plate. I've been in therapy since the wedding, twice a week. Dr. Sarah Brennan over on Boylston. I don't know why I'm telling you that, except that she asked me to think about who I protected by staying quiet, and I realized it was never you. I let that sit. It takes courage to say that, I said finally. It's not enough. Not yet, I agreed. But it's a start. We split the check. We hugged outside on the sidewalk, the kind of hug that is the beginning of something, not the end. She cried a little. I held on for a moment longer than I usually would. Nathan sounds like a good person, she said when she pulled back. He's the best person I know, I said simply. You'll meet him properly sometime. She nodded. She flagged down a cab. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment after she left. The Boston October was doing its thing again. Wood smoke and ambition, leaves going gold, the harbor glinting 3 blocks east. I'd grown up in this city. I'd been made and unmade in it. I'd rebuilt myself 12 time zones away and come back. I pulled out my phone to text Nathan. Lunch went okay. I think it might be something eventually. His reply came in under a minute. Good. Do you want salmon? I found a place that does it correctly this time. I laughed. Right there on the sidewalk in the south end, alone in my coat, I laughed the kind of laugh that is also, a little bit, the end of something long and heavy. My father called me in February. It was a Tuesday. I was in a board meeting and I let it go to voicemail. He called again the next morning. I listened to the voicemail sitting in my car outside our building. His voice was careful, rehearsed. He said he'd been thinking. He said he'd been talking to someone. I noted that he did not say therapist, which told me something. He said he'd made mistakes. He said he wanted to make it right. He did not say I'm sorry. Not once. Not in 4.5 minutes. I put my phone in my bag. I got out of the car. I went to work. Some things I've learned cannot be resolved in a voicemail. Some accounts cannot be balanced by a single good faith gesture after 32 years of debits. I don't say this with anger. I genuinely don't. Not anymore. I say it the way you say any empirical truth. It simply is. My father shoved me into a fountain at my sister's wedding in front of 200 people. He did it because he believed down to his bones that I didn't matter. He was wrong. He has always been wrong. And the most important thing about that, the thing I want you to take from this, if you take anything, is that his being wrong was never about me. Not once. Not ever. A man can look at something real and true and refuse to see it, and the thing remains real and true regardless. I remained real and true regardless. I built my life in the dark, without approval, without applause. I'm still building it. The fountain, I've decided, was the most useful thing my father ever gave me. Because when I stood up out of that water, soaking wet, heel snapped, dress ruined, 200 people watching, I felt, for one crystalline moment, the full weight of what they thought of me, and it didn't touch me. Not even a little.